Story 1. Yes, there was some negative content, but I simply didn't engage with it if I didn't want to. No one forced me to. The internet was also a different environment back then. It was more like a store that was going out of business. You might find something interesting here and there, but most of the space felt sparse and rundown. It was easy to get bored with the internet because it was not the constantly refreshing, overwhelming data feed that it is today. It felt small, and when something new appeared, it stood out. The main attraction was the idea of interacting with people. Email, AOL Instant Messenger, and Internet Relay Chat were popular. Back then, making a long-distance phone call was expensive. The idea of talking to someone thousands of miles away was new and exciting. Felt like a community. Now, the entire internet feels like one of those harmful websites that open hundreds of pop-ups. It's no longer enjoyable. It's simply exhausting. Story 2. Yes, I saw some troubling things, but that didn't change my fundamental sense of right and wrong. The internet didn't shape who I am as a person. It may have influenced my language and references, but it didn't really affect me negatively. Story 3. Totally fine, but I also grew up in a generation that emphasized not sharing personal information online, and I never attempted to meet anyone I knew from the internet until I became an adult. The worst side effect is that I still reference early internet memes with friends of a similar age. All things considered, I don't think that's too bad. Story 4. Seeing two individuals lose their lives at a young age likely did not have a positive impact on my developing mind, especially considering I went home and watched inappropriate content after witnessing that at a fast food restaurant because a friend showed me. I'm doing well. I have a high level of education and sometimes save lives, which is quite fulfilling. Regardless of the distressing experiences we've encountered, none of us should have been exposed to them, whether accidental or intentional. Remember that all of you are wonderful individuals with immense potential, and the world is better with kindness, not violence. Story 5. I had the internet in my bedroom at 13, with Windows XP and dial-up for reference. About 5 minutes in, I found my way to rotten.com. That was the beginning of the rabbit hole. I have seen some shocking things. I was already hardened from a tough childhood, but it really desensitized me, or so I thought. Apparently, it's like muscle memory. If you don't use it, you lose it. I watched some death videos a few months ago, and I felt strange for a few days. Curiosity always gets the best of me. I'm okay, though. I'd say I turned out normal, but to be considered normal in such a profoundly sick society may not be a win. Story 6. I wouldn't say it negatively affected me, but it did give me extensive knowledge about sex and sexual topics. My friends in primary school referred to me as a sex dictionary. Story 7. Some of those graphic websites really open your mind to how troubling or disturbing the world actually is. Story 8. I attribute my career as a software engineer to receiving a personal computer with internet access for my birthday when I was 12. Story 9. As a kid in the 1990s, I feel like we were different from today's generation. We spent a lot of time alone, especially with the internet. We didn't take everything too seriously. Many of us would playfully engage with strangers in chat rooms for humor, and it was all in good fun without any lasting trauma. Story 10. I believe almost every young person has had unrestricted internet access, both now and 25 years ago. How many of us can say our parents monitored our internet usage? Story 11. It introduced me to fan fiction, adult content, cheat codes, and game modifications, and allowed me to learn a great deal of history that I otherwise would have been unaware of. It provided an escape from my father's constant narcissistic abuse. I actually learned what narcissism is from online videos. Now that I am going to therapy and beginning to heal from the abuse, I find that I no longer require adult content as much. There was a lot of good, some bad, but overall it was a positive experience. Story 12. I had unrestricted access but received good education on how to avoid getting into trouble. I wouldn't say it negatively affected me, but if anything, I developed an overly cautious approach and didn't seek out anything particularly suspicious. Story 13. It honed my ability to wait much longer for certain things, a trait I use to this day. I understand not to trust the names of downloads. I know not to click on links. I know to be cautious of mainstream media. I understand not to send personal photos. I know to never provide enough information for a complete identification of myself. I am aware not to trust file sharing services. I recognize that the government is often incompetent, and nothing they collect changes that. Story 14. I saw some content that I absolutely should not have, and it was often by accident. I'm referring to videos that no child, or even an adult, should see. I still think about those videos and their contents even though I'm over 30 now. Ultimately, my life is fine, and it wasn't affected by the videos, thank goodness. However, I can see how it could skew someone's perception of reality when they're very young. Story 15. Amusingly, I think the unrestricted access I had to the internet as a teenager was beneficial to me. As a kid, I was badly bullied, so getting on the internet was the first time I was able to make good friends. I did some foolish things like spending hours on the phone with a couple of those friends who lived in the United States, resulting in a massive phone bill. However, it also helped me learn what it is to have and be a good friend. Sure, I came across some strange content, but I wasn't the type to go looking for the really disturbing stuff. Additionally, I was self-conscious about appearing unintelligent, as even my elementary school teachers participated in the bullying. Being in chat rooms and forums motivated me to learn how to spell. This was basically the complete opposite of what happened for most people, as online language became an issue even in schools. Story 16. I'm actually getting ready to talk to my therapist about this in the next session. Yes, it affected me. Growing up in the 2000s with unrestricted internet access exposed me to many traumatizing things that children are not equipped to handle. Story 17. I had unrestricted access to the internet since age 12 and I am perfectly fine. This unrestricted access included chat rooms. My parents advised me not to share my real name, age, or any part of my address long before such advice became common for internet usage. I also ghosted and blocked anyone who made me feel uncomfortable. Story 18. I think the worst thing about growing up with unrestricted access to the internet is the familiarity I have developed with its instant gratification. As an adult, I find it hard to engage in the real world because I can satisfy most of my emotional needs online. Why would I go out with friends when I can just talk to them on a messaging platform? Why would I try to find something to do in town when I might not even enjoy it when I could just play a video game? Why learn how to play a song by ear when I can just go online and learn it in a day? I am just as much privileged as I am burdened by my understanding of the internet these days. Story 19. These responses surprise me. I'm old enough to remember calling a girl's house and having her dad pick up. I played the leader in this game. I pretended to be someone else and talked to other guys in chat rooms aimed at women when I was a teenager. I also played Ultima Online, the original. Receiving AOL dial-up discs in the mail was part of it. All I learned was that no one is who they say they are, words matter, how to type very fast, and that the internet is like the Library of Alexandria. You can pick up whatever resource you choose, for better or for worse. It's hard to listen to the news telling you to call someone from another country a savage when you are playing a game with them. Story 20. I think unrestricted late-night cable movie channels were worse for nightmares and adult content. Still, it was a very positive thing in my specific circumstance, so I wouldn't trade it for a functional current world in 100 million years. I can only imagine how deeply affected I would be in a more sterile environment, with only my imagination to fuel my curiosity and adventure. Story 21. I don't think it affected me any more than the environment I grew up in. In fact, it probably saved my life. Having a computer with an internet connection in my room allowed me to avoid much of the abusive dynamic in my home and escape into massively multiplayer online games. I was able to find answers to all the questions I had that I knew no adult in my life could or would answer. I never really engaged in chat rooms or message boards, which could have led to a different experience. I did often seek out graphic content. I probably spent too much time exploring morbid material, but ultimately, I think it desensitized me to a functional degree. As an adult, I was able to pursue a career in a field that dealt with challenging subjects and was highly effective at it for nearly a decade before it finally caught up to me. Story 22. Some experiences definitely affected me negatively. I was very interested in watching cartel videos and other graphic content. I consider myself an okay person, but I still have nightmares about those videos even after not watching them since I was about 15. However, there are things I am actually grateful for. If it were not for the unrestricted internet, I likely would have developed homophobic views due to my parents' beliefs. I also would not have met my best friend, who introduced me to my girlfriend. Overall, I don't think it harmed me completely. I'm still a good person, but it has definitely left some marks on me. Story 23. Yes, it affected me, but I recovered. 12. I fell in love with a 30-year-old man. I had many unusual conversations with strangers. I have had therapy, and everything is well these days. However, I shouldn't have had that much access. Story 24. No. The internet exposes people for who they really are. I learned how untrustworthy and unaccountable people can be at an early age. Now, nothing surprises me. It's surprising that people are only now discovering the things I learned 20 years ago. Story 25. I have become somewhat desensitized to much of the current state of the internet. The internet in the 2010s was chaotic. In just a few scrolls, you could see someone dying, something aggressively racist, and a Bible verse. Story 26. I am a millennial and have been able to do whatever I wanted on the internet since its introduction. I have never had anyone take it away from me. I have seen it all, from 2 Girls 1 Cup to Rotten.com, from MySpace to the birth of Reddit, and from ICQ to MSN Messenger. I have probably been on the internet almost every day of my life, and I play a lot of video games too. I now work in information technology and am one of the most successful people I know. I am the most level-headed person in my family. I have kept the same friends from elementary school. I excel in social situations but am also very comfortable being alone. Celebrities and influencers are nothing but a joke to me. I have never been influenced by any of them or felt I needed something they had that I did not. I am great at saving money and never buy things because I saw an advertisement. I played a lot of online poker growing up but never gamble on slots, sports, or mindless games where I cannot control the outcome. I have never been severely hacked, had my identity stolen, or dealt with credit card fraud. The internet has shaped the person I am today. I even married a foreigner, whom I would never have met or married without social media. I have young children, and I will not hide the internet from them. Instead, I will ensure they are well educated about the dangers. They will have online aliases separate from their real names once they are old enough. I will set rules around the length of time they spend online, but it will not involve ridiculous punishments if they do not follow my expectations. I look forward to artificial intelligence and the future of technology. I wish people would stop fighting over religion and race. There is so much more we could achieve if the wealthy were not so greedy. I truly hope our children can do better than previous generations, and I believe they will. Story 27. I have a good job, a loving family, 2 paid-off cars, and I live in a great part of the country. I don't see any issues. Story 28. I had all the freedom in the world because I had my own computer, and my dad had no idea about the negative aspects of the internet. I wasn't into pornography, but I loved the website Rotten.com and learned a lot about serial killers. The most illegal thing I have ever done online was downloading and burning a lot of music. Story 29. I had unlimited access to platforms like KIK, Omegle, and Habbo Hotel. I am now a sex worker. I am happy, healthy, and living my dream life in Japan, with 2 degrees in physics and mathematics. However, this career path is very divisive and has closed many doors for me. Take that as you will. Story 30. My upbringing affected me more than my unrestricted internet access, which was my main way to socialize and avoid feeling isolated. Despite being awkward in person, I still have some social skills because of it. I owe a lot to the internet. I have made lifelong friendships and found communities where I belong. I genuinely feel that without it, I would have become disconnected from society. Story 31. I'm perfectly well-adjusted. 15 years into my career, I own a home, have a wife and kids, and the whole package. I have seen a lot of explicit material, watched many gruesome videos, and played violent video games since I was a child. As I mentioned, I am doing fine. However, I am quite obsessed with my wife's appearance. Story 32. Was I unrestricted? No. Did I act like a teenager and take no as a challenge? Yes. Did I have friends who also engaged in teenage antics with me? Yes. I have many problems with my brain, but I can assure you that the unsettling content I encountered online had nothing to do with any of those problems. I was broken long before I had any sort of access to the internet. Story 33. It is extremely problematic, especially regarding issues related to sexuality, boys, and self-esteem. Keep your children away from the internet for as long as possible. Story 34. I have illegally downloaded many movies and books. I saw some crazy things in the early 2010s, but aside from that, it was fine. Story 35. I loved growing up in the Wild West era of the internet. Chat rooms, forums, AOL Instant Messenger, and AOL websites. It's hard to believe we had such unrestricted and unregulated access to the internet. Story 36. Googling illness symptoms often leads to anxiety. The more I search, the worse it gets. I might have a headache and convince myself I have a rare tropical disease, but it often turns out to be just dehydration. Story 37. No, it did not. It helped me discover people and things outside of my conservative religious bubble. I honestly loved experiencing the dawn of the internet. I am 37. Story 38. I have seen many things and done things I shouldn't have. It hasn't affected me, but I am very protective about what my niece and nephews view online because I understand what is out there. Story 39. I watch adult content multiple times a day. Otherwise, I am a normally functioning member of society, present for my family, and feeling okay. Story 40. I mostly avoided the horrors and kept to video game forums. Whenever I got a strange vibe from someone I talked to online, I immediately stopped communicating with them. I am often online and socially awkward, but I believe that even if I spent more time outside, that would still be the case. Story 41. Not very social, but otherwise fine. I didn't have much interest in the graphic websites and similar content. I was mainly a YouTube kid who really loved Roller Coaster Tycoon and Zoo Tycoon. Story 42. People who may be affected by the internet are susceptible to being impacted by whatever comes their way. Story 43. The challenges of receiving an iPhone at age 10 with full internet and application access, and no parental controls or checks, cannot be overstated. There was an overwhelming amount of inappropriate content and exposure to violence, as well as the risk of being manipulated into sending inappropriate images to adults. On the bright side, I am now a parent, and my children are not allowed any devices. I only permit pre-approved television shows. Live and learn, I suppose. Story 44. I wish my internet use was restricted when I was younger, especially Safari, but I turned out normal after taking a break for a while. Story 45. I believe the significant factors are my lack of discomfort around violence and being completely unfiltered when I am comfortable with others. Story 46. I believe it actually made me a better person. I had access to all kinds of information, and there is no way I would have known about anything related to the LGBTQ+ community beyond just knowing that there are gay and bisexual people, issues affecting people of color, different cultures, and a wide range of other topics. While I might have come across things a teenager probably shouldn't have, I also gained a wealth of knowledge. Story 47. I believe I'm fine for the most part. I looked up some topics that people discussed because I was curious. I was wise enough most of the time to know when to stop, but I think my exposure to that information has helped increase my tolerance for it, for lack of a better term. Story 48. I have seen some disturbing things. I also know a great deal because I have had unrestricted access since I was 9. Story 49. I posted some inappropriate content to Facebook when I was 12 that makes me cringe when I see it in my memories, all set to public for the world to see. Thankfully, I figured out how to mass delete this content, so it's finally all ancient history. Now, if only I could erase the memories of everyone who has ever seen those posts, like in Men in Black. Now I'm a hopelessly internet-addicted 27-year-old. Story 50. There's a lot of disturbing content available online, including graphic websites and videos. I think I understand the nature of that content now. I intentionally sought out various chat rooms on platforms like AOL and Yahoo to gain insights into the reasons behind racist attitudes. Someone mentioned that the Bible contains references suggesting negative views towards people of mixed heritage. Story 51. I'm feeling unwell, but it has nothing to do with the internet. I was one of those kids who really wanted the forbidden knowledge I would gain when I was older, and I'm glad I was able to ask questions online. I shudder to think of previous generations who had to figure things out with their peers or with adults. I'm relieved I didn't have to rely on reading alone. Story 52. I wasn't creative enough to misuse it. I went into some chat rooms, but they were highly monitored and actually quite wholesome. Story 53. Probably not any more or less than I did without it. My innocence was probably gone before I used the internet. Story 54. It instilled respect for certain things in me, including speed, the meaning of war, the dangers of certain drugs, and the importance of context before taking action. Although I witnessed unimaginable horrors, loss, and foolishness, I experienced it in the safest way possible. In that regard, I learned several other important truths that many sensible parents might not openly discuss. Despite everything, I turned out well from a societal perspective. Story 55. I'm not sure if it did or not. I am autistic and facing challenges, but I consider myself skilled at creating compelling narratives. Story 56. I am a millennial whose parents worked in technology, both in the public and private sectors. I received many lectures about not believing everything I see and avoiding certain material. Admittedly, I was exposed to pornography long before I should have been, mostly by friends with equally unrestricted access. However, we also had many websites when I was a teenager that discussed how pornography is not real. I believe there are ways I could have been harmed by the internet, but I actually think that having unrestricted access at a time when Google's search functions were more robust and less tailored to advertising, when Ask Jeeves was still relevant, attending classes in middle school that taught safe internet usage, and having websites like Neopets that targeted a child audience actually helped me engage with the internet in a healthy way. Yes, my internet experience was unrestricted, but the kid-focused websites were appropriate, such as Nickelodeon, Zoog Disney, and various Neopets knockoffs. We had so much age-appropriate content available in classes, lectures, and presentations that educated us on how to avoid inappropriate content online. As a result, I honestly did not encounter anything excessively disturbing until my teenage years, during which I still learned a great deal about the world. If anything, I don't think unrestricted internet access negatively impacted me. I believe overbearing parents, who would often snoop to find my diaries, for instance, so they could read them, had a much greater negative influence on me than the internet. Story 57. This question seems unnecessary. You could easily find the answer through a simple search. To address the question, it is irrelevant. A depraved individual will always find other ways to satisfy their urges until they eventually find easier means. To summarize, if you raised your children poorly or they have antisocial personality disorder, they will likely engage in harmful behavior regardless of their media consumption. Story 58. I didn't have it as bad as the people who regularly watch graphic content, since I only saw it once, driven by morbid curiosity after seeing a mention in a Matthew Centaro video about disturbing websites when I was 9. However, being exposed to adult content at age 12 without fully understanding it did affect me. Additionally, going down the antisocial justice warrior rabbit hole at a young age made me a pretty unpleasant child with some harmful views that I only unlearned after my brother came out as transgender. I could list a number of other unsettling things I encountered online as a child, but that would be a lengthy list. I did get very involved in fandom discussions as a teenager, particularly the debate between pro-shippers and anti-shippers, and I was very pro-censorship due to the trauma of encountering explicit material at a young age. Ironically, I was groomed by some individuals in the anti-ship circles despite their aversion to inappropriate behavior. I'm still unlearning those experiences, but I also tend to avoid pro-shippers, as I now believe both sides consist of unkind people. Stay away from fandom discussions, kids. It's a waste of time at best and detrimental to your mental health at worst. Story 59. Everybody talks about the strange things they experienced, including graphic content and adult material. I played many online games and ended up on Tumblr. I did see a lot of adult content, but it was mainly art of fictional characters rather than real-life pornography. Now, I have some unusual preferences. However, being on Tumblr, which may sound completely bizarre, was actually one of the main factors that helped me break free from my previous beliefs and leave the Mormon Church. I believe the internet actually helped me in that process. Story 60. I had unrestricted access to everything as a child, except for adult content. With movies, shows, and games, my mother said it wasn't real, so I didn't need to take it seriously. But if there was something to take seriously, she would tell me. The same applied to the internet. Graphic content was everywhere back in the day, so many people my age grew up quickly as a result. I consider myself a fairly normal person. I don't believe it had any significant impact on me other than some early maturity. Story 61. Around age 12, I was playing Grand Theft Auto 1 and using Napster. I had seen inappropriate content and some disturbing material. This experience taught me the importance of finding positive activities to engage in. The shock from that content prompted me to seek out other interests. I began programming at an early age and realized that if I learned enough English, I could access the latest information for free. Story 62. Children grow how they grow. I am a researcher at a university. When I was a college student in the United States, drinking and partying were common. When I first moved to an Australian university, I was surprised to see fully licensed pubs on campus, close to the lecture rooms. However, years later, I no longer see university pubs. This isn't due to a change in the law, but rather because younger people are not partaking as much anymore. They seem too busy with startups and yoga retreats, all chasing after wealth or pursuing well-being first lifestyles. As a child, I was the first in my friend group to have my own computer in my room. There was no internet yet, just games. Everyone thought I would fail all my classes because of it. I did fail one test, but now I hold a doctorate and design advanced medical imaging technologies. Children follow their own paths. I know a couple of professors who homeschooled their daughter because they believed traditional education was inadequate. She is now an adult performer, and her parents are proud of her because she learned to be safe and responsible, no matter the life she chooses. Additionally, she earns more in a month than what her parents make in a year as professors. My wife, who is a medical doctor, and I are very relaxed about education. We both studied extensively and decided to prioritize play and exercise for our child's upbringing. He attends Bush Kindergarten, and we do not engage in any advanced early learning activities. Recently, he asked me to take him to the library, hopped on a children's computer, and began doing math lessons on his own. The other day, he wrote down his own name without any formal teaching from us. Children follow their own paths. Of course, all decisions as a parent have an impact, but it is difficult to make any definitive predictions. Story 63. I saw inappropriate content online when I was 12, and now I read and write explicit material. I also have unusual interests and avoid anything related to Undertale. Story 64. Honestly, I feel like I'm fine. It made me want to learn and do more. That said, it's up to the child or teenager, as well as their personality and limitations. Story 65. I had access to the internet from the age of 13, and everything happening back then highlighted the importance of privacy and discretion. By the time Facebook came along, I recognized it wasn't worth the hype, so I never joined the social media trend. I still don't participate, even though I work in information technology. The early internet taught me the significance of maintaining a low online profile. Story 66. I believe I turned out okay, but I could have easily ended up differently. I discovered many dark aspects that affected me emotionally and mentally, but thankfully real life, despite its challenges, helped me recover. I do miss the wild nature of the old internet. The theory about a diminished internet is real. Story 67. I frequently watched Faces of Death. It desensitized me to many cartel-related videos I encounter as a researcher. Story 68. I'm all right. I believe I would have experienced mental health issues regardless, as it runs in the family. However, some of the content I encountered on graphic websites will haunt me forever. Story 69. It led me into several unusual interests over the years that the average person might consider odd. For instance, the unique and niche aspects of various online platforms, such as DeviantArt, Writing.com, and fanfiction, to name a few. It also influenced many of my current preferences in adult content. Story 70. I have encountered many troubling individuals. Reflecting on it makes me feel uncomfortable and exploited. I have become desensitized to certain experiences that I should not be. However, growing up in a very isolated and abusive environment exposed me to the realities beyond my sheltered existence. I learned about actual science, various religions, philosophies, worldviews, and cultures, which helped me understand that my treatment and circumstances were not acceptable. Therefore, my experiences had both positive and negative aspects. I don't think I would want to change them. Story 71. I discovered Taking Back Sunday and thought I was incredibly unique and interesting. I messaged strangers on Habbo Hotel and played flash games. I didn't really discover pornography but did find erotica. Could have been worse. Story 72. I had internet access from around 14 or 15. It wasn't exactly unrestricted, as I had to share the computer with my mom and brother. By 16, I was exploring relationships in chat rooms. At 17, I went off to college and had unrestricted broadband access, which enabled me to start writing. At 19, I experienced my first real kiss. Admittedly, I eventually became pregnant, but I was 30, married, owned a house, and actively trying to conceive. Story 73. My parents were quite controlling, but when it came to the internet or anything on a computer, it was a complete free-for-all. We first got the internet in 1996. I got into software piracy early on, then MP3s, and later I joined Internet Relay Chat and discovered even more treasures. If anything, it taught me problem solving and how to navigate uncharted territory. Overall, it was a net positive, though it did have its downsides. At least there was no social media back then. Story 74. In my early 20s, I worked on open source projects preserving evidence of war crimes in the Syrian civil war. The aftermath of barrel bombings was posted on platforms that would otherwise have deleted the content due to their terms of service. In hindsight, we need not have bothered. No one was ever truly going to care about it, but I was young and naive, and that's a different conversation. I genuinely believe that recreational viewing of sites like Rotten.com and Portal of Evil as a child is why I do not have post-traumatic stress disorder from spending hours cataloging footage of actual war crimes as a young man. I may have a bad dream once or twice a year, but the work traumatized others who witnessed the same events and are still affected by it over a decade later. Additionally, reading Sean Baby and browsing something awful as a child profoundly influenced my sense of humor. Frequenting subreddits in the mid-2000s, when things were at their wildest, inoculated me against ever really getting violently offended by anything on the internet. Story 75. It was unrestricted, but my brother and I were taught basic internet safety and informed about the existence of online games. I have played many seemingly obscure German online games that vanished when Flash was discontinued, and I'm just glad I never downloaded anything from my old anime websites. Now, as a typical autistic adult, I know my way around the web. I love horror, which I attribute to old CDs, and it was further fueled by older creepypasta channels. Story 76. I am in a different category. I was born before the internet was in everyone's home. By the time I was 11, we had a computer. I think it was 1997 when we got it. Maybe 1996, whenever Urza's Saga came out in Magic: The Gathering. I was given unlimited access to it, barring the restrictions of living in a 5-person home with dial-up. I had already been a troubled kid. My friends and I were wild, but we all played games on PlayStation and did BMX. From the time we got the first PC until I was maybe 27, I lived on the computer. I did everything on it. Meeting people, exploring relationships, seeking therapy, you name it, I have used the internet for it. I think it affected me socially and desensitized me. The internet was like the Wild West back then, and I certainly explored every corner. I regularly met people in real life from 4chan. I gave advice and posted stock tips. I was a member of the original Wall Street Bets, which I joined after posting stock information on 4chan. Literally, there isn't an aspect of my life untouched by its impact. and I am still hopelessly addicted to video games. The difference now is the commitment I have to make to sit down and play them. I would say, for me, it was amazing, but I technically had a very wild outdoor childhood. If I had kids, I would never let them use the internet until they could think critically. Story 77. As someone who did not have restrictions on internet access during my preteen years, but faced them after my mother remarried and had younger stepchildren with no internet access restrictions, I can say that these limitations drove me insane. I was 8 when I got my first phone, having owned a handheld gaming device before that. Up until I was 16, I faced no restrictions. Then my mom downloaded an app that would turn off my phone at a certain time or block certain websites. I found clever ways to bypass it, which only led me to hide more from her. At that time, and even now at 20 years old, I thought it was odd to install such restrictions on my phone then, rather than when I was younger. Story 78. I won't blame everything on it. My childhood had other hazards. However, I was on a much less moderated internet at a young and morbidly curious age. I certainly wish I hadn't seen some of those videos. Learning about mass deaths and looking through pictures of the state of the bodies gave me horrible nightmares and some very bad days. I want to specifically mention a video of a deceased baby. I can't go further into it, you don't want to see it. If a higher power exists, it is best left off the internet. I saw it in middle school, and it comes back vividly anytime a book I'm reading has a dead child. Nothing affected me quite like that. Story 79. I turned out to explore the kink world, learning what it means to be a soft dominant and having some unconventional sexual fantasies and interests. Overall, I would say I'm doing well. Story 80. No. If you see things you weren't supposed to see when you're young, it only affects you as an adult if you were destined to be unusual or unwise anyway. At least, that's my opinion. Story 81. It affected me less than having difficult parents did. To be honest, if I had supportive parents, I would have had better coping mechanisms to deal with the challenges of unrestricted internet access at a young age. Story 82. Nope. I'm still very much alive, without anxiety or depression, and I am probably the most emotionally stable person among everyone I know. My internet history is quite tame, though. Unrestricted internet access just led to downloading video games and reading adult fan fiction. Story 83. It was my parents who caused my struggles, not the internet access. I might have succeeded in taking my own life if I hadn't had the internet while growing up. However, I am unique. Story 84. I unlocked the internet when I was 10 years old. That's when I realized that I didn't need to log into AOL for internet access. Instead, I could bypass all parental controls with Internet Explorer. I looked at a lot of adult content. I don't think it had much of an impact on me. I was already quite different, and I didn't enjoy a lot of misogynistic material. I had early interests that I chose to explore instead. Story 85. I made my first high school boyfriend wear a dog collar. His name tag had the degrading name I gave him. I am much more balanced now that I'm not reading Harry Potter fan fiction every day. Story 86. When I addressed my actual issues, the problems I associated with early unrestricted access to the internet disappeared. Story 87. It has made me nostalgic for the internet of the late 1990s, when not every website was attempting to track my data or display advertisements. Story 88. I think the internet has saved many people from difficult childhoods. Individuals in challenging situations can see that life is not always as it is at home. For example, if you grew up in a very religious community, the internet could be your only exposure to non-religious or even counter-religious perspectives. Just realizing that people exist who think differently is significant. It's all about how you utilize what's available to you. I know classmates who may have been negatively affected by the internet and its culture, but I would argue that is the minority. I believe about 75% of people use the internet for positive purposes, such as gaming, learning, and connecting with others. Conversely, around 25% may encounter unusual content online, such as conspiracy theories, but ultimately, it's about how you handle that exposure. Story 89. I grew up knowing the difference between fiction and reality. Whether that makes me fine or not, I do not care. I just need Puritans and other pearl clutchers to leave me alone. Story 90. It affected me deeply. but it was also the only thing that ever helped me escape my extremely abusive family home. The fact that I could just get on social media and find someone who would pick me up or let me stay at their place when things got violent was crucial. Child Protective Services and the police didn't do anything because my father was wealthy. Therapists only reported to Child Protective Services, and schools simply sent me to therapists. The internet provided my only escape from abuse, and I will always be grateful for the ability to reach out to random acquaintances to find a safe place. However, I have definitely struggled with internet and social media addiction my entire life, likely fueled by viewing it as a valid support system. It's become overwhelming. I want to disconnect from all these devices, but I'm still here. I frequently left my phone at home when going to the library to study. I've had enough. Story 91. Probably much more dirty-minded than I would be if I didn't have a computer. To be honest, maybe not. I was already dirty-minded. Story 92. Finding out about my interests is the only positive aspect I gained from the internet. I didn't go out much as a kid and didn't have many friends. I discovered music, video games, television shows, movies, art, and more through the internet. The downside was stumbling upon inappropriate content related to my favorite characters through search engines. It's too easy to come across such material, even when you're not looking for it. This is especially concerning for children who may not understand the implications of what they find and may click on things unknowingly. Most kids will encounter such content regardless of their age, and they will eventually learn about those topics. I just hope it's not through the same experiences I had. I wish for something less peculiar and shocking. If it happens, I hope it is not as strange as some content I encountered. Story 93. The internet raised me. If anything, it saved me. It may have caused some issues, but personally, I gained more benefits from it than drawbacks. Story 94. My internet access was unrestricted from the age of 13 or 14. It was actually very beneficial for me. My parents did not proactively discuss many life issues with my brother and me, and I discovered communities of adults who talked about relationships, sexuality, morality, and essential life priorities in mature and constructive ways. I owe a great deal to these communities for the self-worth I developed as a young adult, my ability to not let my relationships or mistakes define me, my awareness of various world issues, and my willingness to actively pursue goals and issues that matter to me. Story 95. I never got into the gruesome stuff. I just never found it interesting. I assumed that material was available, but I watched Two Girls, One Cup after my friends told me to. That was a bad idea. What it did was affect my learning. I was always a curious kid, and after being told, I don't know, too many times by my parents or other adults, I just stopped asking. I got the internet and did it all myself. I built up a large vocabulary from watching educational videos and reading encyclopedias. I now believe anyone who doesn't know something just doesn't care enough to look it up. There is no excuse for not knowing how to maintain a car, fold laundry, or fill a dishwasher. I also built my first computer at 14 by myself and could have done it earlier because I watched hundreds of videos before that. I was modifying Minecraft at 10 and creating batch programs for fun. Having the internet has made me a better jack of all trades, and for the things I don't know, I can look them up. The pre-adolescent adult content wasn't helpful, but other than that, I'm not sure I would change a thing. It's been such a net positive that I'm not sure if I will limit my own kids. I couldn't be the person I am today without it. I also likely would have harmed myself before middle school, so there is that as well. Story 96. The internet raised me because my parents were inadequate and shouldn't have had children. But I'm fine. I actually dislike technology and only spend about an hour on my computer each night. I am 32 years old, married, and have 3 daughters. I own my house and both of my cars outright. One is a 2020 model and the other is a 2022 model. I also own my own business, but I work independently as a school bus driver for my children's school, since I get paid to take them and several other kids to school. I have various items like lawn mowers, trailers, and golf carts. I own everything I have. I work hard and play hard. The internet didn't ruin me, but it definitely helped me make the best of my situation. I remember being in kindergarten, getting off the bus, microwaving a can of SpaghettiOs or ramen, and then going to bed because my parents worked second shift to avoid us. I didn't spend much time with either of my parents while growing up. My mother passed away in 2010, and it was somewhat of a relief. I have been on my own ever since. The first thing I did when I held both of my daughters was kiss their foreheads and whisper to them something along the lines of, "Welcome to the world. You will never have to worry about where your next meal comes from. You will never come home from school to an empty house for hours on end. And you will always be loved because you don't deserve what I went through." Story 97. I'm good, honestly. I think that internet access really helped expose me to a broader variety of opinions than I otherwise would have seen. I believe I would be a lot more immature as a young adult if I hadn't been exposed to the internet. I also discovered many book series and movies that I love, which inspired me to start writing, now one of my favorite hobbies. A lot of the reason I'm well-adjusted is that my parents discouraged me from having personal social media accounts until I was older. I only had YouTube until I was about 14, and nowadays I still only use it along with Reddit and Tumblr because I don't like the idea of sharing my entire identity with the world. I would say it was a very positive and constructive experience for me, largely due to my parents ensuring that I used the internet appropriately and never put myself in danger. Story 98. My brother and I discovered anime, manga, music, games, and other forms of entertainment that we would have never found without the freedom to explore. Did we see some unusual content? Sure, but it didn't scar us into lifelong therapy like some media portrays unrestricted internet access. The only ones who suffered were those who didn't understand that you shouldn't share personal information as a child with random people online. These are the individuals who encounter predators in their local parks and end up in therapy. It was enjoyable and exciting as long as you knew not to disclose personal information. Story 99. Honestly, I'm doing great. All my mental issues were caused by things that happened in the real world. If anything, my escape to the internet helped, along with therapy as well. I've seen some really disturbing things that no one should see, let alone a child. But it truthfully didn't affect me negatively. Story 100. I am smarter and very thankful for it. I also feel quite overwhelmed. Watching certain disturbing content and exploring the dark web can be a sobering experience. Story 101. Honest answer, it provided material for me to tease my friends and vice versa. Well-adjusted and in the top 1 to 10% depending on the measurement criteria. Witnessing 3 men assault a homeless individual with a hammer teaches important lessons about morality and how to compartmentalize, which is a valuable skill later in life. Story 102. I wonder how many kids accidentally stumbled upon goats. That was definitely an anatomy lesson. Also, I'm proud to say I still haven't seen the video 2 Girls 1 Cup and have no desire or intention to ever see that. Story 103. My parents blame the internet for my mental health issues and psychological problems, but it is just their abuse, to be honest. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.